Hi, everyone. Today we're going to take a look at the early stages of World War II and explore them primarily through why Japan and why Germany were so successful early on. And they're actually kind of two related topics. Um, Previously, we looked at kind of the very beginnings, the Great Depression being the lead in, Hitler's rise to power, Stalin's rise to power, trying to set us up with the leadership of World War II. So this is just stupid. Hitler and Chamberlain on September 30th, 1938, in Munich, Germany. They met at the Munich Conference to discuss the issue of the Sudetenland. Hitler desperately wanted the Sudetenland, claiming that there are Germanic speakers there, that they're being mistreated by the Czechs, and belief that it should be part of Germany once again. Chamberlain on the left there, and others, including some of the other kind of bigger powers in Europe, agreed to these demands, proclaiming there will be peace in our time, a long-lasting peace as a result of this. Then Hitler takes the Czech Republic, and 1 year later is going to take over Poland as well. And so that kind of goes against everything else. This is just a meme that I found. Kilroy was here was a very popular thing in America. The troops brought it overseas, and it was actually believed to be something serious, looking at whether or not it was aspiring in Europe at that time. So planning, Hitler's plan during World War II is to unleash the Blitzkrieg, this incredibly quick, swift style of warfare using tanks, especially large tank divisions, to be able to run right over the enemy. Remember, the tank was introduced towards the end of World War I and first kind of saw how that eliminated the trench warfare. Hitler is going to invade Poland on September 3rd, 1939, after September 1st, declaring that he was forced to do so because people refused to just give him Poland, or Poland refused to just give itself up. On September 28th, 1939, Poland was completely overrun and taken over and made to be a part of Germany. The Allies, remembering World War I, they declare war on September 3rd as well. The Allies, remembering World War I, think, okay, well, this is going to be a defensive war. We want to draw this out. And so in the lead-in to World War II, France developed something called the Maginot Line, that's heavily defensed, able to withstand aerial attacks, able to withstand tank attacks between the border of Germany and France. And they're remembering the regions of Alsace and Lorraine, which again are popping up. They've been doing so ever since the 1870s, and how they got control over those from Germany after World War I. They think Germany is going to attack right back through there again. So they plan this defensive line, and Germany goes right around it, doing basically the exact same thing they did in World War I, entering through neutral Belgium and Luxembourg, and it completely takes France by surprise. These Blitzkrieg tactics being used starting in April and then in May. We see France is basically completely encircled, and you have these large amount of British troops who are there, basically being routed. And if you've seen the movie Dunkirk, that evacuation is as a result of the Blitzkrieg from Germany into France. So they invade in May, and by June, the second assault occurs in southern France, and by the end of June, really about 2 months, if not a little bit less, France completely surrenders in 1940. There is a separation between a distinction that is made between Nazi France, the reddish pinkish hue at the top, and Vichy France down there in the south. But in reality, those things are actually pretty much the same thing. The Vichy France government is looked at as a puppet state as opposed to it being France as we know it. This West Wing clip is going to go through some of the issues as France began to become occupied. You don't have to watch that with me right now. You can do it at your leisure. So here's what we're looking at really by 1942. Basically, the whole of Europe has been conquered by Germany. They get as far as they're going to get into the Soviet Union, as we can see by this line here. And that's where we're going to be traveling next. Things are going to start to change in 1940. Winston Churchill takes over for Neville Chamberlain and his appeasement policies prior to the war. August 1940, the London Blitz begins. Hitler knows he can't just invade, have some sort of marine assault on the island of Great Britain. That would be ludicrous. So he begins by trying to soften up the target in line with his Blitzkrieg tactics. So bombers day and night. The Luftwaffe is in charge. Hermann Goering is the person in charge, and he's a right-hand man of Hitler, but he's not a military guy. Neither him nor Adolf Hitler are traditional military leaders. They're people who took part in World War I, but they did not take on leadership roles. And so we see some difficulties and cracks in the visage beginning here. London Blitz begins the Luftwaffe, the Air Force, um, hands it over to Goering, and Goering switches pretty quickly, about a month in, from military targets to civilian targets. And this is a problem because it allows Britain to regain its footing militarily. They start to win back the skies, and Germany is forced to use bombings only at night. And so Britain is able to read them, prepare for them. They have radar, early form of radar at this point. They've cracked the Ultra Code, one of those codes used in World War II. And so they're able to know when and where these attacks are going to take place and plan for them. And the hardened British people are going to look at this and say this is a point of pride for us moving forward. By September 1940, the daytime assaults are called off, and by 41, the assaults are called off altogether. And so that kind of relinquishes Hitler's ability to knock Britain out of the war quickly so that he can then focus on the Soviet Union, as we'll see. His attack on the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, is going to be delayed. In October 1940, North Africa, Italy is supposed to be controlling North Africa. They're failing in that measure, and so Hitler has to commit additional resources. That's going to delay the ability of Germany to put together this plan and then be able to invade the Soviet Union. June of 1942, so we see late summer. We see some early victories for Germany and the Soviet Union. They keep pushing them back and pushing them back. But as we know, when you attack Russia, you are attacking the entirety of Russia. So as you're able to move forward a little bit into Russia, you still have to deal with Russia moving further and further back. Russia can keep giving ground and giving ground and giving ground and still be able to withstand your attacks. The Battle of Leningrad, it's a siege. It's going to last for 900, an astounding 3 years, basically, that Leningrad is completely surrounded, but it holds out. Here are some pictures from the bombing of Britain. You can see this one in the middle here, the very iconic milkman still delivering milk as firemen are fighting a blaze behind him, the rubble in the streets from the destruction of London. Here is the planned Russian attack, Operation Barbarossa. We have 3 separate areas, Leningrad headed towards Moscow and then headed towards Stalingrad. Now, originally the plan called for this region here in the Caucasus. There are large oil fields in this area, and so that would give Germany a supply line to help them to move further and further into the Soviet Union. The problem is Hitler gets kind of preoccupied with Stalingrad. A little bit of editorializing from me. He's such an iconographic guy. He's such a symbolic guy. He steals a lot of things from ancient Rome. He likes the ideas of symbolism, and to him, Stalin is the enemy. The ideas of communism, that those are completely at odds with his nationalist socialist policies. And so I think the idea of defeating the city that holds the name of the enemy leader is kind of something that's stuck in his craw and he can't get rid of it. So even though after the initial attack fails, he could have just moved on to the region that was the initial plan, I think that he's stuck on Stalingrad kind of for that reason. He refuses to let his men move backwards. He refuses to give ground. And I think that that kind of falls in line with his absolutist mentality. Hitler's going to make some mistakes. I want you to watch this video clip. Click on the link there. Numbers 8754321 are of the most importance to us. So please do be sure to check those out. Around the same time period in Japan and the West, we have the tripartite pact between Japan, Germany, and Italy. And on December 7th, 1941, which the next day FDR will declare a date which will live in infamy, the Japanese and Emperor Tojo, as you see there in the upper corner, they attack Pearl Harbor. And the idea is to destroy the entire Pacific fleet, cripple that fleet, making it difficult for the U.S. to intervene in Asia. Germany, for its part, probably should have let this be. But instead, Germany immediately declares war on the United States as the U.S. declares war on Japan in honoring their pact. Now, Hitler doesn't honor most of the things he signs anyway, so it's unclear why exactly he does this. But now this draws the U.S. in, and so the idea is the United States now is looking at fighting a two-front war in the Pacific and in Europe. If Hitler leaves the United States alone, it's possible it takes them longer to get into Europe, and they concentrate their forces in the Pacific a little bit longer, and that may have given Hitler an opportunity to declare victory in the West. Possibly underestimating the USA, especially in terms of economics. The United States is enormous, and to this point has remained pretty isolationist. Yeah, they signed the Lend-Lease Act to sell goods to the Allied troops. But ultimately, the increase in the U.S. economy is absolutely astounding, and that's kind of what this next clip is all about. FDR declaring in a State of the Union address how it will transition into a wartime economy, and then from there we see exactly how wrong he was as it transitions much, much larger and much quicker than he even could have expected. So that gives us basically the Axis powers here, the tripartite pact making up Germany, Italy, and Japan. Then we have Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, Bulgaria. It's unclear exactly how aligned they actually were to the Nazi ideals and how much they were just trying to back the right horse at this time. Finland never actually joins the Axis, but is kind of by proxy declared an ally of Germany, and this is because they're fighting against the Soviets in Finland, and so therefore they are on the other side. Pearl Harbor and the Axis powers is going to lead to the Grand Alliance. That's Britain, the United States, and the USSR. It's not until that point that we see all three of them sign up together. Germany's declaration of war essentially overpowered any anti-communist feelings that the United States had, any uncertainty with dealing with the Soviets. They're willing to put those differences aside and join with the Soviets in an effort to defeat the common enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, as the basic concept there. So choosing military over politics, and eventually at the Tehran Conference, they meet together and they decide that we're looking for unconditional surrender of all sides. There's no suing for peace. There's been too much bloodshed. There needs to be an unconditional surrender. Battle of Midway is really the turning point in the Pacific. Again, a lot of this is just looking at turning points in big events. 1942, summer of 1942, it's a turning point in Asia. But now that the U.S. is able to hop island to island, we see Hawaii down here and then Midway up in this region here. They're going to hop from island to island, making their way across and eventually look at attacking the Japanese on mainland, the main islands of Japan, Honshu and Shikoku, Kyogo. But they are able to now concentrate even more forces on the European side of things. And so that kind of is the beginning of the end, even though it's a point in Asia for Europe as well. Then we see the USSR in Stalingrad. You see this battle lasts through the Russian winter. Don't attack Russia in the winter, my friends. The lesson that can be learned from Napoleon, really anybody who tries to attack Russia in the winter. Also, Germany is once again fighting a two-front war. Either take care of one side first and then go to the other, or do vice versa, but don't attack both sides at the same time. That's a huge mistake. As I mentioned, because of their allies, Germany delays the entrance into late summer, August, and that means that they missed out on the best time to attack Russia. Because once winter hits, it's Russian winter, and then once spring hits, as you'll see in the next slide, we have a whole new bevy of problems to deal with. Hitler is going against the larger strategy in southern Russia by trying to take over Stalingrad, and Stalingrad is unbelievably heavy warfare. It is fighting street to street. If you've ever played Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, that's what it is. You have to clear street by street, in some cases floor by floor of buildings, and it really just makes things extremely difficult for the Germans to do, because the Russians are fighting on their own soil. They're fighting in their own homes in some cases. And this is really the turning point in the East, because the large German army that is attacking is surrounded, and Hitler refuses to let them retreat, and so they're surrounded and cut off and captured. So you have a choice of either Russia in the wintertime. You can see this is a frozen Russian soldier that the Finns are actually using as a street sign. They put pieces of paper in their hands to help guide them along the way. Over here, this is the springtime. This is Rasputista, and everything that is not paved turns to almost unavoidable mud traps. So we see here at Stalingrad, Friedrich Paulus surrendering almost 100,000 men, including generals, to the Soviets. And you see the sheer numbers down here at the bottom. Take a look. The U.S. loses about 416,000 troops in all of World War II. The Soviets, just at Stalingrad, lose even more than that. For every 3 soldiers killed in World War II, it is estimated that 2 of them were Soviet soldiers. So that's where I'm going to stop for now. I'll get back to it with North Africa, and then we'll see the end of the war later on. If you have any questions, as always, let me know, and have a great day.